How prompt we are.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Joe Exotic TV channel, where we're going to discuss Alan Glover tonight and his testimonies and some of the problems with it. With me, as always, is Theresa Mckeown. What's up, Theresa?
Hi, Jim. Happy to be
Hey.
here, seeing your face.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to start us off a little bit here tonight?
Yeah. So, you and I touched on Alan and the pizza phone and all that, but I started getting really curious about the fact that, the way I understand it is, in order for them to have had a murder for hire charge, they had to have an exchange of money, correct? That's why the undercover FBI agent, that wouldn't have flown. So their person that got Joe convicted is Alan Glover. So he is a pretty damn important part of this story, right?
Huge.
Yeah.
He's the hitman.
He's the hitman. So
the alleged hitman.
The alleged hitman. So I spent part of my day literally digging through his entire court testimony. And when I wasn't chuckling at times, because, I mean, the things he said were pretty funny at times. You know, he kept cussing, and they were like, could you please save your language for just direct quotes? And it was very, I don't know, but anyway, so the thing that really, there was one thing that struck me more than anything, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but if I were Joe's lawyer and I listened to what Alan said on the stand and the parts where he was contradicting himself and everything else, when it became my turn to get up there, I would have ripped him apart as the most, like, such a not a credible witness. You know what I'm saying? Why would you believe anything that comes out of this man's mouth? He must have said 5 or 6 different times he was high, drunk, driving drunk. His litany of things. And
he can't remember anything at all, but he can remember a murder for hire like nobody's business.
Yeah, it was astonishing to me. So the one thing that really got me, because we had been talking about the phones, is the prosecutor was asking, did Joe give you the phone, blah, blah, blah. And he wrote, she said, do you have the phones now? And he said, no, you do. And she's like, I'm sorry. He goes, the government does. So, and then I checked with Ann today, too, to make sure I wasn't crazy. Not only did they have the phone that had that text back and forth thing that we showed previously, where he's talking to his girlfriend and saying, yeah, Joe called the phone today and said, who is this? He couldn't figure it out. And, he clearly, they had the phones. So how is it possible that Alan could be on the stand, the prosecutor is, cross-examining him. He's saying that, that Joe gave him this phone and he went and took pictures of Carol and all this other stuff. And his attorneys didn't point out, wait a minute, that's not true. It's simply not true. I don't get it.
I'll tell you what, there's perjury up and down. There's inconsistencies throughout this entire thing. We're about to pick it apart. One that I laugh at, I just want to show this real quick. You mind if I show this real fast?
Oh, please do, yeah.
I just want to start with one simple perjury. Literally, we're going to get deeper into this, but I just want to show everybody just one, okay? So I'm going to pull it up here. I'm going to share my screen as I always do, and I'm going to pull this up for you guys because I don't know. I saw this and I just started laughing. So here it is on page 625. So this is direct questioning from the U.S. Attorney, Miss Green, to Alan Glover. And it's specifically because he just went on a big rant about how he's a convicted felon. So he can't use the rifle that Joe wants him to use. And he can't use a crossbow because he's a convicted felon. Not to mention the fake ID. We'll dive into all that stuff. But then she's literally asking him direct questions here. And if you look at this, the question is very specific. In connection with, it's on line 8, here's the question. In connection with his idea that you use a gun, did you ever go shooting guns with him? Yes, ma'am. What was the purpose of shooting guns with him? Target practice, shooting at tannerite. What is tannerite? Explosives, right? We saw that in the show. They'll go ahead and hit it and boom, big fire, big explosions, right? So he's sitting there admitting right there that he goes ahead and he absolutely shoots with Joe for target practice. Right. But then let's get where he has the cross-examination aspect of it, right? He's got a cross-examination on page 665. Sorry about that.
Yeah,
I'm getting to it.
There's a lot of pages to go through when one is looking at this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
So then it gets into this thing here, right? When it starts asking, now, have you done some shooting practice with Mr. Passage on the zoo? I have been out there when he's shooting. Have you yourself fired? I have been out there with him shooting. Have you yourself shot the gun? Nope. I have to just point that out just because, look, right away, in case you missed it, jury, that's actually a perjury charge, or prosecutor and judge and everybody else involved. You missed one, at least one right there. But we're going to uncover a lot more. But I just find that to be hilarious.
Well, yeah, and there were many moments like that during the testimony, I have to say. I would go back and reread it because I didn't quite believe he really said that. But here's the hit. Okay, so with the phones and all that, and the fact that this man that we're talking about is the so-called alleged hitman that was paid $3,000 by Joe to kill Carol, according to him. However, the $3,000 came from the sale of, is it a liger is what the animal
Correct, it was a liger.
Right? So, and Alan was directly involved in it. He actually went and got the animal and brought him to the person. The person gave the cash to Joe. Joe accepted it on behalf of the zoo, which, as you'll know from everything Jeff Lowe has ever said, he was the guy that owned the zoo at this point.
Right.
So technically now he's selling a tiger from the zoo to this guy, gets the cash. So then the next day, I guess Joe takes $3,000 out of that cash. And as we know, request of Jeff to give Alan enough money to go home. And that is the exchange of the $3,000. But then later on in the trial, and again, I don't understand why nobody noticed this or brought it up, or no, like even as a coincidence. But they literally said, "You're in debt to Mr. Lowe." He goes, "Well, a little bit. I had $3,000 to pay him. I got $1,000 left to pay him." Like, really? Okay, we're talking $3,000 that Jeff told Joe to give to Alan, but now Alan's saying the $3,000 was for him to go, kill Carol. So
right.
Why didn't anyone connect those dots? I mean, he said it point blank. He also said that he felt bad because he's like, well, I had to talk after stealing that money, it was kind of hard. So it's like, so he kind of took the money.
I actually have some of that here. You're talking about the one where he claims that he stole the money, right?
Yeah.
So let's see. I'm gonna find that and pull that up here, as we have it, of course.
Well, and okay, so still on that same subject. So I have an email from Joe where he was talking about, he's like, why didn't the feds confiscate my phone, my computer, or anything to look and see if he even texted Alan or James or Jeff or anybody about doing a hit? There's no evidence of that anywhere, right? And they had everybody's phone. They had Jeff's phones, they had James' phones, they had Alan's phone. They didn't come up with one thing where Joe contacted any of them about anything. The only text that I've seen is Joe sending that text to Jeff saying, Alan stole the pizza phone. So I'm flabbergasted that it was like his attorneys didn't bring that up. So
since we're going to go ahead and talk about the $3,000 payment, and I think what everybody here needs to understand, right? There was this liger. This man showed up. Now through photos, I want to say a photo lineup because the guy wasn't like a suspect, but using a photo is this the person that you talked to? Yes, it was, right? 3 affidavits. You have 3 people that have confirmed this now. Alan Glover, James Garrettson, and what's the other one? Was it Jeff?
Wow.
Who was the third? Right. Jeff. So 3 people confirmed that this is the person, all right? And in the court testimony, the person's last name is Mr. Engesser. And if I said that wrong, I apologize. I'm not always the best with last names. But that is the person in question that came to the zoo that Alan Glover apparently got this liger, walked it over, put it in the, basically helped get the liger into the vehicle for the guy, seen him. Now you have 3 people that have identified this specific person. The reason why this is so important is because when that cash was handed over to Joe in an envelope, allegedly, that was the money that was given to Alan to go down to Florida and to go ahead and do this murder for hire against Carol. That was the money. That's a very, very, very big piece to this pie. Now, I'm going to go ahead and show you how that is all a bunch of crap. All right, so here we go. This is in the testimony, okay? So remember, 3 people now have confirmed that Mr. Engesser is the person that was at the zoo that purchased this liger. Now, I'm actually going to take this for you to page 907. If any of you happen to have printed out the whole testimony that's available, it's public record now. I'm going to go down to page 907. All right, this is Agent Matt Bryant. Okay, so let me go ahead and share the screen. All right, so this is direct testimony by Agent Bryant. Big piece of this whole pie. It states in here that they went and tracked down Mr. Engesser. All right, and this goes from page 907 to 909. And within this record, guess what? It wasn't this guy. And I don't know how this got through, but they have been able to confirm that this guy was actually in Indiana at a car dealership on November 22nd he wasn't even there. Like you go down through it through 907, it talks about it. And I'm going to read to you exactly what Agent Bryant states. Well, the question was, as you sit here today, do you believe that Mr. Engesser was at the park in the end of November and providing money to Mr. Passage in exchange for a cub? I have no reason to believe that. Mr. Engesser could not have been there, that it could not have been him also based on his statements. The guy was able to prove that he was at a car dealership in Indiana. Hate to say it, jury. I don't know if you're asleep on that one, but you kind of missed that. That's kind of a really big piece. And I don't think a lot of people know that. But there it is, Agent Bryant, the USDA agent, the one who kickstarted this whole murder for hire and got the FBI involved and worked with Jeff Lowe and James Garrettson and put all this stuff together. In his own testimony, the main purpose of the person who paid the money, that's a huge piece. In an envelope, cash given from this particular individual, Mr. Engesser, to Joe, who then gave the money to Alan Glover to allegedly go down and whack Carol Baskin. Well, that person wasn't even at the zoo. So what does that tell you? The zoo was owned by Jeff Lowe. So who gave him the money to? And then you got Alan in his own testimony talking about he stole $3,000 from Jeff and still had to pay that back.
Yeah. And so this is maybe I watch too much Law and Order, but honestly, when you see on those kind of shows where there's a person on the stand saying ridiculous things, and then the other attorney, a defense attorney, gets up there and they rip them to shreds, and they just like go at them, and then you said this, and then it wasn't true, and then you said this, and then you said, you know what I mean? None of that happened. They were quite polite with him, I thought, on the cross, and it's just so basically the only money that ever changed hands was that $3,000, and everything is basically
which he literally admits to painkillers, cocaine, and drinking. So he either drank it or he snorted it within a couple of days of getting this $3,000. But remember, I didn't want to take the cell phone with me to Florida. I'm just that good. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, well, and that's the other thing that Bill pointed out to me recently, because she, when he's testifying, she said, you testified yesterday that you did go to Florida. He goes, yeah, I went somewhere in Florida. Didn't take your phone with you, right? No. She goes, now you're aware that phones have location information on them, right? He said, right. Yeah. So if they had the ability, could figure out where a phone was at any given time. Oh, yeah. And isn't that why you didn't take your phone to Florida? Yeah, pretty much. But then Joe tells me that he left the phone in South Carolina, which is why it didn't ping in Florida, when the truth was the phone had been shut off. He says he has the AT&T records will show it, and that he didn't go to Florida, and that she knew that. But whatever, prove that.
Well, why don't we show it right here where he's questioned that he didn't go to Florida, and lo and behold, everybody, this is another big piece. Again, jury must have been sleeping, judge must have been snoozing. There's another big bomb here. Let me go ahead and share this screen. All right, so here it is. This is, by the way, this was caught on an audio recording. It's not like this was just pulled out of thin air and just a random question. This is in cross-examination by Joe's defense attorney. She did a good job on this one, but unfortunately it ended up turning into some objections, and it didn't go in Joe's favor. Imagine that. The thing that could exonerate a guy doesn't go in his favor. Right. Seems to be the common theme here.
Questioning by Amanda Green or by Joe's attorney?
This here, he was getting questioned by Joe's attorney, and it says right here on 13. Remember, this is an audio recording. Right. Do you recall telling him in the context of what's going on, I can say that I went down there then. Do you remember telling Mr. Lowe that? No, I don't. So if that's on a recording and it shows you saying that, how would you explain that? Say I went down there for a day. How would you explain telling Mr. Lowe, you'll say that you went down there if you want me to? No, I never said nothing like that. So here he is. Literally, it's right here, people. That's another full of crap coming from a guy who's probably intoxicated while on the stand, because they asked him that question too. And yet, whoa, imagine that. You know, he ends up saying, I'll tell him I went down there.
I love it. Were you drunk at the time? He's like, no drunker than I am now.
Yeah, no drunker than I am now. Like, wow, imagine that. You know, so I mean, it's literally, you read through these court transcripts and you're like, how in the hell did anybody pay attention in this? And honestly, I feel a lot of the problem in this particular case, I don't think it's that I think Joe's defense attorneys at that time did an okay job. They tried to do what they could. The problem was that they were not experienced in animal laws whatsoever. And it would have helped Joe to have somebody that knew that particular law that could have challenged a lot of these things that went on throughout his court case. But specifically speaking to Alan Glover on this, he was caught on an audio recording, literally saying, I will tell them whatever you want. I'll tell them that I went to Florida. Well, gee, imagine that. You can't, I mean, look, I went to college. I've done my fair share of partying. I've been so blitzed that I don't remember things. I get it, but I most certainly wouldn't have been able to function a car. Here's a guy that's so worried about the convicted felon, about my rifle, about the crossbow.
He couldn't bring a gun, and he couldn't bring a crossbow, so he was thinking he could get it off.
I have a fake ID. Maybe that violates myself as well. But yet I'm going to go ahead and get in a car in South Carolina. By the way, I have a suspended license, or I don't have a driver's license. Right. I'm going to get absolutely blitzed. And I'm going to go somewhere into Florida. I couldn't tell you where. He could have made it to Jacksonville for all we know. Right. He said a beach. What beach? You got the Gulf and you got the Atlantic. Which side were you on? I can't tell you where I stayed. I have no clue. I stayed at a little resort and partied with some people on a beach. I was there for a day and a half. Oh, and then I drove back up to South Carolina. But I never went to go talk to Carol. I never brought a phone. Dude, like, what?
Well, that's what I'm saying. How can, as a juror, if I'm a juror, how could I actually believe anything that came out of his mouth? Anything. He has no credibility as a witness. And yet his testimony is what convicted Joe of the murder for hire. I mean, bottom line, he's the only one that money was exchanged. They claim that again, I'm not a lawyer, but I understand it, that you can't have a conviction for that unless money was actually exchanged. And no money was ever exchanged with the undercover guy. And according to Joe, he was just playing along to find out what they were up to, because he knew he was being set up. So he was just playing along, because there's a whole bunch of texts with Agent Bryant and James where he just constantly hitting him up. Have you talked to Joe? Have you talked to Joe? We got to get him on a recording. Got to get him on recording. And Joe never once initiated that conversation ever. He always waited for James to bring it up, and then he would just kind of go along with it to see what they were up to, mostly, So,
Well, you have a couple problems here with this murder for hire. No, the money never went through the actual agent. It came from a third party, and now that third party person that claims Joe's the one who gave the money to Alan Glover, the person that with the liger that was sold for it, the person that you're using as the main person of getting that cash to give to Alan Glover was in Indiana, wasn't even in the state, was at a car dealership. So now you got that problem. So really, where did the money really come from? The zoo was owned by Jeff. The money came from the zoo.
and it was
I was a man sitting behind bars for that.
I know. That's what I'm saying. It's like, I don't understand. And again, if all of this, they had, why didn't they dig into his computer? There's so much information on computers, and they never bothered to look through the computers. All the QuickBooks files that show all kinds of things going on at the zoo. None of that was ever put into evidence. Just the cell phone printout, they didn't even have to listen to it. It was just right there in black and white, that clearly Joe didn't know what happened to that phone. And when he did find out that Alan had it, he shut it off. And that's why he was staying in Florida, because there was no service on the phone.
Exactly.
Alan was such an ace hitman that he knew if he brought a phone with him, they'd track him. Like, really?
Yeah, he wanted to use a crossbow and put on some camouflage and hang out in the woods on a bike path that's behind Big Cat Rescue. Whatever, buddy. Let me share the screen, because somebody in here in the chat here just put out something that makes a lot of sense here. They want us to put it out. It was Alan Glover came out and did a statement through TMZ, and I'll go ahead and show that. And basically on this statement, he says that he wished he could have done more.
Yeah.
So here it is, right? Hitman Alan Glover. I wish I could have done more to hurt Joe. In his own words here, according to TMZ, he wished he could do more to hurt Joe as payback for, as Glover said, all the misery he caused people and animals. He even says he was gunning to pay Joe back.
Wow. Yeah. So
I think a defense attorney would have a field day with that one, because clearly you're biased and clearly you have a vendetta out against Joe. And so you're going to say whatever you got to say to get him out of your way.
He didn't say that till after the trial, but, on the appeal, of course, that would be coming into play. But, the bottom line is, I don't understand how a jury, 5 or 12 adults could sit there and say, yeah, this Alan guy, I'm going to believe everything he says. And, if he says Joe gave him $3,000 to go do a hit, I'm going to believe that. And again, not to put all the blame on his attorneys, but honestly, if they had just gotten up there and when they cross-examined him, just started pulling all these inconsistencies together, go through the transcripts after court that day, go like you and I just did, find all these inconsistencies, and then call him back up on the stand and say, okay, explain this.
Well, a lot of the problem is that when things were brought up that could exonerate Joe, there was objections to it, and the judge sided with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and those were not allowed to be pursued any further. You had to change your questions, or you have to go to a completely different question. You got to strike it off the record, things like that. So a lot of that was going on. Of course, I will say the U.S. Attorney did what they needed to do, but the defense team really couldn't put up a true defense for Joe. And when you look through these things, I mean, my goodness, why didn't Jeff Lowe ever testify? I mean, this is a big guy behind this, and you're talking about a person that could potentially have conspired with Alan.
I know.
That's a huge thing. I mean, they should. I want to say more. I'm going to wait on that one, because I know Joe's current attorneys, Francisco Hernandez and Jeff Hoover, and of course Joe's investigator Eric Love, are working on something right now that's going to be presented on a mass scale here soon. So I don't want to step on their toes, but something is coming down the pipeline. I can guarantee that.
Yeah. But I agree with you 100%. I am just in shock that some of the most obvious and simple dots weren't connected, and that, that Jeff Lowe was not subpoenaed by either side. That's what I don't understand. Neither the prosecution nor the defense subpoenaed Jeff. And then they were supposed to subpoena another vet, and they claimed they couldn't find her. Or a USDA inspector, and they claimed they couldn't find her. Like, how can you not find a federal agent. I mean, they go to work,
Right.
So
And John Rinke actually came on here and said no money changed hands on the second charge, and he still got conviction. And I agree with you, John. I hope one day you and I can have a good chat, because I think there's a lot of information that you can share. I know there is, actually, and you should have been allowed to go up there and say the things that you needed to say too.
yeah.
So I always have that open door for you if you ever want to talk.
Yeah, so I'd love to have John come and talk with us one day up here. He's got a lot of information, that man, and he was really good at his job, so he knows what he's talking about.
I agree. And, again, still one of the big questions still out there is, and then Chris on this chat brought this up too, is, all these animal charges that Joe got are civil charges. Should have been fines. He's the only person ever in the United States ever to be charged criminally and sitting behind jail. So not only we debunked the murder for hire, I mean, come on, anyone can do that at this point. It's such weak sauce. It's unbelievable. I don't know what the jury was looking at.
He spent in jail or in prison already it doesn't even matter anymore about the animal charges, to be honest, because even if he's already served that time, if they were ever stick, he is now serving time for the murder for hire, which as you just pointed out
clearly didn't exist. Like it just read it to you.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I'm sorry, but if the evidence isn't there to support a conviction, it's not a matter of, well, I think this still happened, so we need to convict. Yeah. It's either the evidence is there or it's not there. The court is supposed to be very black and white, not gray. You're not supposed to float around in this gray area and convict people in the gray zone, or where you think they did this, or, you know what, I'm about 75%, 80% sure this happened. If you're not 100% sure, you can't convict. That's how this court system was supposed to be run, and that's what it was designed to do. And clearly, that's not being done, and it's not being done here in this case. I literally just pointed it out. If the main person involved with buying a Liger that gave that cash to Joe, and then that cash went from Joe to Alan to do a murder for hire, and it has been proven by the own agent's testimony that that person wasn't even at the zoo, and your three main witnesses have all agreed that that was the person at the zoo.
Right.
And you have confirmed that that person was not actually there, was at a car dealership. How do you convict? And I think some of those people involved with this really need to come forward and start realizing what a botched job they did, and that a man is sitting behind bars right now for that. And if you have a soul, and if you have a conscience, you need to come out and you need to speak up. Yeah. You can make a wrong a right here by fixing it. No, he won't get his time back, but getting him out of jail gives him an opportunity of freedom. And I hope you look deep down in your soul and realize that you did a real terrible job and a terrible thing to a human being that's sitting behind bars. That's my challenge to you.
I love it, and I'm behind it.
Perfect. Well, you have anything else we want to share on this tonight?
No, I think really that this was very pointed today, and really, just connecting some dots. I don't think that anyone's taken it. All it is taking the time to look at it. We just had to look at it. That's all it was.
You got to dissect it. That's all you got to do. Read it.
Average people. We're not lawyers. We're not prosecutors. We're not. But just Joe Normal here, I can tell that this was not done properly. So, people need to know this. So, anyway, this has been really interesting. Really interesting.
I think it's been interesting. It's been great talking with you. And I thank everybody here for listening and being involved in this and hearing what the actual facts are. Share this everywhere you can. Have them come on the Joe Exotic TV. YouTube doesn't ever go away. So if they can go on there and watch this and listen to what we've got to say, because we were showing it to you. We're not pulling this out of thin air. Yeah. We're actually showing you the documents and where it is within the court testimony. I mean, it's a trial transcript. It's public record. Anyone can access this. Read it for yourselves. You get some pointers from us to give you kind of like a Cliff Note version of where some things are at, but it's right there. And it's time for this man to be out of jail. Enough is enough.
I agree. I am with you. All right, my dear.
We will be back soon with some more information. We'll make sure everybody gets that out. We'll put it on all the channels. We'll let everybody know when the next broadcast is. It'll be sometime in the next few days. Stay happy, stay safe. Happy New Year to everybody. Have a safe time, and we will see you soon.
See you next year.
Exactly. Thank you, Theresa.
Thank you, honey. Bye.
Good night, guys.